The International Blind Cafe 18 Plus presents Conversations from Booth 6.
This episode is brought to you by Thoughts 2-4.
Order up.
Is this the one for booth 6?
Yep.
Hello and welcome back to the International Blind Cafe. We're set here in our favorite corner booth, number 6. And this week, we have a cast of characters that some of you know well and some of you don't. But the great thing about the blind community is there's a commonality. So half of our cast this week have dealt with sight loss for their whole lives, and the other half experienced sight loss suddenly with no prior diagnosis or expectation of blindness. So again this week, we have Mr. Reynolds in the booth. And Jason, if you could maybe give us some insight to one thing that you knew for sure. Oh shoot, I might need to go to an optometrist. And what led to your sight loss?
Yeah, I was about 45 years old and I had no prognosis of ever going blind. And I started noticing when I looked into dark spaces, like opened a cupboard or something, I couldn't see into it anymore. I could open it up and I couldn't see into it unless the light was directly behind me. And also transitioning even from shadows, like from a shadow of a tree or whatever. When I transitioned into the shadow and transitioned out of the shadow, it took longer for my eyes to adjust. And that's when I really noticed that something wasn't quite right. And within about a month, I went from driving long haul heavy trucks to not driving a bicycle. So it was like really sudden from the end of July to the beginning of September. So it was that quick. Someone else that's sitting in the booth tonight had kind of a similar story where they lived into midlife and no prognosis of going blind, fully sighted, full career. And that'll be Jody. Jody, you want to tell us a bit about yourself and your story?
Yeah, well, for about 20 years or so, I was working as like a computer technician and basically living life normally with full sight, with glasses. I could see perfectly. And then suddenly in 2019, in the early months, I was getting these like little like snow blindness when I go from inside to outside. I thought that was just like the snow. But then the next few months, the whiteouts would be hitting me far more frequently. Maybe they would last like for a few seconds, but while you're driving, that's dangerous. Finally, towards the summer, they were happening so often that I finally decided to take myself off the road before something happens to me or somebody else. From then, I went to optometrist to get it finally checked, and they did some scans, looked inside, and she sent me to the ophthalmologist and sent me to the hospital to check with a neurologist and ophthalmologist. And after some testing, they discovered like probably pressure was building up. And like everybody's brains produce cerebral fluid at the same rate, but my body wasn't absorbing it well, and pressure was building up around my brain and damaged my optic nerve from behind. And I had an operation to relieve the pressure, but it's not abnormal, but it's still far lower than where it was before. But right now, my remaining vision everything is severely, massively blurry. I can still see some details, but nothing and not enough to read anything. So these days I rely on screen readers on my phone and computer to read everything for me. So that's my new reality now that I'm living with.
So how did you find the International Blind Cafe, and what keeps you coming back?
I was on Facebook and somebody told me about it. I decided to join it for a while, and it's when I started talking to some of the other people in there that I was starting to really enjoy talking to other people that would understand some of the frustrations and things I was newly learning to deal with. So it's good to have some sort of camaraderie in that way, that you can talk to other people that actually understand what you're saying, what the frustrations and the joys and other things like that.
Absolutely. And then we have Scout. You guys, you may recognize Scout. He does the lead in, but Scout's also lived with vision loss most of his life. He's had some usable vision, and he's got quite the interesting tale to tell. Scout, do you want to kind of tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I'm Scout, and I hail from Ontario in the Great White North. I came to the International Blind Cafe by a referral. So I have a friend who was on the cafe before I was and said, hey, come and check this group out. And kind of uniquely, I didn't come by way of Facebook. My friend and I came by way of Discord. We were already on Discord, part of other groups. And then we joined with the cafe, and I decided to stay with the cafe. Been here for almost 6 months now. And it is being able to network with people and being able to hear other people's stories, like Jody's story and Jason's story, and so many others who are members in the cafe. It really is comforting to know that other people have the same challenges and they overcome a lot of these same challenges. Now, mind you, I have lived with sight loss my whole life. I was born with congenital familial aniridia. And for the most part, in my first few decades of life, I had lots of usable vision, but always legally blind. So I never drove like Jason or Jody, but I did enjoy lots of activities like riding motorbikes, driving go-karts and boats, and all kinds of outdoor extracurriculars. Really was the staple of my life. And as a young adult, I became a professional cook and was trained classically in culinary arts. And I thought, hey, this is going to be something I can do. But as I got into my late 20s, I realized that my vision, my eyesight, was beginning to wane. And it's progressive, not as progressive as other eye conditions. However, there's some compounding, what do you want to call, symptoms that go along with aniridia that do prevent any kind of correction. So there's no surgeries that can correct it. They've tried lots of different surgeries. People in the aniridia family would know. However, as of late, in the thanks to the International Blind Cafe, and they're working with Hadley School for the Blind, or hadleyhelps.org, I've learned Braille, and I'm learning more Braille, and I've actually quite excited about it. And now I want to get good at Braille. I want to get good enough that I can pass those skills on to people. And I know that we have screen readers and such, but I'm always concerned about when technology fails us. And those old tried and true, old and tested ways of using a cane or using Braille, they always seem to come into perspective. And there's just something about doing what has always been done that makes sense to me.
Thank you, Scout. Speaking of the tried and tested old ways, we've got Ken with us today, and Ken happens to be one of the oldest members of the cafe, and he's just an interesting fella. He's lived a very colorful life, and And do you want to tell us a little bit about your story and then how you came to the cafe and why you keep coming back?
I found the cafe because every now and then Facebook would say you might be interested in these groups, and I was looking at the different groups, and for some reason the cafe stuck out, and there were other blind groups, but I thought, well, I'll just join this and see what happens. And then I realized that you couldn't just join it; I had to participate. So I went in and learned how to get into the cafe when it was in Facebook, and I met some really interesting people. And I will say that I've been legally blind all my life, and I've been real active in the Commonwealth of Virginia with blindness issues, especially with the Agency for the Blind. And I've learned more from the group than I have from the perspective of the Agency for the Blind in Virginia. I mean, they do things totally different. They don't want to understand us. I can say I've got a problem, and someone in the group will tell me how to solve it. But before I got with this group, if I had a problem, I had to find my counselor, ask him what could be done or her what could be done. Then they would have to go search it. But now I've got a wealth of information. It's like having an encyclopedia with my computer. You guys have really opened up a world for me. So, but now back to being born blind. I was born totally blind. I was operated on 6 months of age at Johns Hopkins Hospital. I had congenital glaucoma. They say, and I was too young to realize this, but I've been told I was the youngest glaucoma operation at Johns Hopkins at that time. I went to regular public schools. I did 1 year at the School for the Blind in Virginia, and that was the worst year of my life. Literally, because I was away from home, and I didn't read Braille, and I had to know Braille, and it was just a complete uprooting of my life. And so my mom was nice enough to bring me home after 1 year. I went to public elementary school, public high school. I played football. I played basketball. I wrestled. I was in the Latin club. I was a thespian. I was on all the school plays and stuff like that. I sang in the choir. I sang in the madrigals. I was in a band for a number of years. Oh, gosh, there's so much I've done. When I got out of college, I went to college. When I got out of college, I opened up a gas station that was not making any money, so I bought a second gas station that was making money. And before I knew it, I had 5 service stations. Thank you, Atlantic Richfield. That's a free plug for you. Then I went from that to what's called the Randolph Shepherd program, where blind and low vision men and women become entrepreneurs in the restaurant and coffee shop business. I did that for a while. While I was doing that, I got involved in advocacy, and I wound up being the chairperson of the Mayor's Committee for People with Disabilities. And I was vice president of the Virginia Association of the Blind for 4 years. And I was president of the Old Dominion Council of the Blind for 2 years. And that just kept going and going. And I wound up on the Sister Cities Commission in Virginia Beach. At any rate, while all this was going on, I also became a lobbyist, and I worked as a lobbyist for 25 years. I retired about 3 years ago or 4 years ago, and I've been relaxing ever since. In fact, sometimes I don't get up until the late hours of 7 a.m.
Ken, you make a very fair point that just because we've got vision loss or sight loss, we're not just lumps. We all do things. I know Scout and Ken, you're both married, and all four of us, live independently. We all cook for ourselves. We all take care of our own households. So it's very, it's very important for people to know that just because we have sight loss, we still live standard lives as anybody else does. And then we talk about going blind all of a sudden. We do know people within the group that have gone to bed at night and woke up blind in the morning. And I couldn't imagine that horror story. At least I had 30 days or so to prepare for it. I couldn't imagine doing it overnight. So, Scout, you were a trained cook. How were you able to adapt some of your cooking styles as you've lost your vision?
Well, I certainly could do it professionally. And it's really a misnomer whenever you hear or see that there's these cooks who are celebritized, that they are totally blind and they're working in a professional environment, because it is really not conducive to the visually impaired cook. And that's really too bad. I know of certain circumstances where there have been professional cooks that their kitchen was set up to them so that they could still lead the team and get the service done. That just wasn't in the cards for me. And I haven't been a professional cook for quite some time now. But I did use a lot of the techniques that I learned in culinary school and working in various kitchens. And probably the most important thing that I could ever say to anyone is mince in place. Everything in its place. So planning and organization in the kitchen, whether it is for your sanitation, your proper storage of food, and preparing food safely. That means sharp knives. That's right. Scout uses very sharp knives, very, very sharp knives. But I do it in such a way that it is safe for me and anyone who's going to be in the kitchen with me. Because why? Well, food brings us together. And I don't just want to be in the kitchen by myself. My spouse will come in there. My kids or grandkids are in there, my friends. And I have to be able to move around the kitchen and know where everything is. So everything in its place. And I prepare by gathering all of my ingredients and tools and being all set up so that I can go from this to that, and I'm not wasting time in going after this item or that tool. And I think really that is the very most important thing, that anyone who's going blind or who is already experiencing sight loss and they're like, how am I ever going to be able to do this for myself? I would just say, take a breath and think about it in such a way, the one famous blind person, Eric Weirmeyer, who's climbed Mount Everest, he always references this as systems. Everything has a system. And I would say that mince in place is very similar to that, is that put everything in its place where you know where it is. And even if you're not up to labeling things with Braille yet, keep everything where it goes and replace it, and have your family do the same. And you're not going to be lost along the way.
Definitely, organization is the key. Especially, I live in my own apartment by myself, and when people do come to quote unquote help, the next 2 days I spend trying to relocate stuff because they've moved it to make it look tidier. But no, it's a matter of me being organized. So I totally get that. So Jody, I mean, a conversation we had earlier today or the other day, you mentioned that losing when you lost your sight all of a sudden, it was kind of like it was demasculating in such a way. You lost that manly ability to drive. So how did you overcome that?
During the transition period, like there was signs that even while driving, I was what my eyes were beginning to not be able to see well. My brain was compensating by kind of filling in the blanks with hallucinations. Like I would look outside the window and I could see like fabulous mountains and castles where there should be just roads with trees and grass. My brain would be filling in the blanks with just filling in the blanks to what the eyes could no longer see. The brain would just fill it in. I no longer have hallucinations now, but in the transition period, I saw a lot of them. And after the vision goes, you kind of learn to adapt in many ways, and knowing where everything is very, very important.
That's wild, because I know what part of Canada you live in, and there's no fabulous castles and mountains over there. You live at the wrong end.
Yeah.
But so that would have been a wild trip.
If I could paint well enough to paint what my eyes were seeing, that would have been beautiful.
Create your own fantasy drive.
Yeah.
And I know Ken, you've lived a long, colorful life too, and you do a lot of traveling. I know you've been to places all around the world. Can you kind of touch on traveling for the visually impaired? Because your visual impairment hasn't stopped you from visiting the four corners of the planet.
Well, you just brought up the fact that I also belong to the Flat Earth Society, but I've been to Europe, and I've been in Asia extensively. In Asia, the only thing that bothers me when I'm traveling is I cannot see the overhead monitors, but at the same time, I can easily find an airport worker or a airline employee, and I just tell them how far is gate B3 from gate E25, and they'll tell you how to get there. Sometimes you can get a little ride with on one of the little buggies. I never take the wheelchair. For some reason, when an airline knows you're visually impaired, they have a wheelchair waiting for you, and I have to explain to them that I can see to walk. I just can't, I'm not going to ride in a wheelchair. But traveling is not that hard. I also use assistive technology. I use a little pin item that's a camera, and I just point it and it tells me what I'm looking at and reads it to me and stuff like that. And that's very helpful. And I use my white cane when I travel. I find that there's two things that I've learned. When I'm in an airport, if I tell the ticket agent that I need assistance to the boarding area, then that's what you get. You get someone who'll come and take you to the bowels of the airport and bring you out right at the boarding area. Or if I want to go shopping, I keep my mouth shut and I just go ahead and start finding where all the good stores are. But that's pretty much, traveling it's not that hard. And more people with visual impairment and blindness are out there traveling all the time now. A quick story, I was on a plane flight to Tokyo, and the airline attendant came to me and said, "Could you please go across the aisle to the other side of the plane and go up about 3 or 4 rows? There's a blind gentleman there." And I reamed this poor lady out. I said, it's not true. We don't all know each other. I don't care what anybody says, we don't. And I walked over to the other side of the plane, and I knew the guy. And I felt so small, and I apologized profusely.
Well, yeah, sometimes it is a small world. Like, I didn't know anybody that was blind before I got into this group. And to find out that within 10 minutes, there's at least one blind person that lives within 10 minutes of me that's a member of the group, and 2 or 3 members of this group live in the same province as I do. So it's not a very big community once we get out here and start communicating, and now we've been doing this for 2 years. We're finding that there's relationships forming and friendships forming, and people are going around the world to meet each other, and it's really been an amazing journey that way. So yeah, more and more people are traveling. Assistive technologies too, like Ken, you've been blind the longest, obviously. I'm sure it's been quite the journey watching assistive technologies grow, yet I like my basic white cane. It's the most liberating assistive tech I have, as much as my phone has all sorts of assistive technologies on it. How do any one of you guys feel about the way technology is going in the assistive device category, Jody?
For when I first received the white cane, I have to say I was a little bit embarrassed to have it open, using it openly. But in a little while later, I realized I was following some friends down the street and they were walking really fast. With the cane open, I was practically able to keep up with them, barely anyway. But since then, I've been using it openly, happily, because with it, I'm able to walk down the street a lot more confidently. Whereas without using it, I might be able to walk down the street, but there's always that constant level of anxiety weighing on me, and I'll be walking a lot slower too.
How about you, Scout? What do you feel about technologies?
Well, I would reiterate too that even though I had low vision for most of my life, when my vision really started to go, there was a lot of things that I started relying on my spouse for. And that really weighed on me, putting so much more on her plate. And it was things like pumping the gas and going in and paying for it, or just going up and at a restaurant and paying for the bill or something. Because all those barriers started to come into play where I couldn't use the pay terminal because I couldn't see the screen or the numbers anymore. And like you kind of said, like makes you feel less of a guy, because the guy goes and pays or whatever. In those traditional senses of things, like jumping out and washing the car at the car wash, and when you can't see some of the mud or the salt or whatever, then you have to bring your spouse out, and well, they're out there, they might as well do it, right? Or things like cutting the grass or running the snow blower. But when I started using the cane, I really did feel liberated. It felt like I got some of that independence back. And no, it's not the same as when I was a youngster and I would jump on my dirt bike and go ripping through the woods. But it stopped me from always relying on my spouse to be there. Oh, I can't go to the post office, or I can't go over to the dentist or whatever. Once I was able to use that cane, and I resisted it too, even though I've been living with sight loss and low vision my whole life. You would think that I would have been, it's not a big deal, this is just the next thing. But it really wasn't. I was very resistant for a long time, and I don't know if I was in denial as much as I was just kept pushing the envelope. And once I accepted that my life wasn't over, it had just changed, and I had to change the way that I did things, and things started getting easier. And using assistive technology, it really does help. Whether it's a CCTV or a video magnifier to enlarge things, or learning Braille, or using a cane, or even getting a guide dog, which I probably never would consider getting a guide dog, but I guess I'm not to that stage yet. And maybe someday I would say, no, I need a guide dog.
Well, and the thing is, a lot of those assistive technologies, especially the apps and stuff that are on the phone and stuff, you can use discreetly. But and as liberating as the cane is, because once I got using it, it totally detached me from the end of my driveway. And you got less reliant on the people around you. But at the same time, you're putting on your blind uniform almost. Like you're putting on that sign saying, hey, look at me, I'm blind. Because you've got that. A lot of us wear sunglasses because of light sensitivity. And you are that stereotypical blind person walking down the street because you've got that white cane. And it's such a universal identifier. But I can't see them staring at me anyway. So Ken, what about you and the assistive technologies, especially as you've seen them emerge as we've gone through
For
time.
the years. Well, I never was able to drive, and I used to tell parent groups that I would talk to of parents of children that are visually impaired. I'd tell them not to be too worried that no girl ever dated me for my car. So, that's a big thing, though. That's a very manly thing. That's this car thing. And also, I was sitting here identifying with Jody and with Scout. It's been recent that I've quit pumping the gas in our car. So that's a progress going downward a little bit. I have trouble in restaurants with the menus, and even though I've got assistive technology that will read the menu, sometimes I will just tell the waiter or the waitress, "Can you please describe what this is, because I'm legally blind?" Or sometimes I'll just say, if I'm in a good mood and I think I can relate to the waiter or waitress, I'll just say, "Please describe your menu. I can speak your language, but I haven't learned how to read it yet." And I sort of work around all that. I've been having trouble mentally for years with a cane, but I've gotten to where lately I've been using it more. And I also use a walking stick because I have some leg issues. And I find that by using the walking stick, it's allowed me to open up more to the white cane, which I found kind of unique. I think the white cane is sort of a definitive thing. It's like you said, your blind uniform. You put that white cane out there, and you're already marked at that point. So I'm trying not to use that, but now I'm getting more and more comfortable with the cane and the walking stick. So I've used that, but I'm more into the electronic apps on my phone. I think there's a lot of competition out there right now to try to come out with the best apps. But I really like my I don't want to say the commercial name for the product, but I've got two products that I use. One attaches to my glasses, and the other one I just keep in my pocket, and I just use it to point, and it talks to me. But other than that, I'm in the same boat everybody else is in. Even though when I was born, the boat was an ark, but that's okay.
When they say that the kind of a thing amongst the group these days that we've got to be smart to be blind. We've got to be so tech savvy to use some of these apps, but at the same time, we couldn't have picked a better time to be blind in the world. Right. They're really starting to step up and try and make a world that's much more accessible for us. So
they truly are very, very useful. Like for what Ken was saying, I would use the app, take a quick photo of the menu pages, and I can scroll line by line with the screen reader each item on the page, including pricing and ingredients if necessary. It'll all be, everything's in text all of a sudden in my phone.
Yep, just absolutely.
It really is probably the best time to be blind.
If you'd like to join us, there's always a seat for you in Booth 6 at the International Blind Cafe, Discord server, and Facebook group.